The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows, their strange forms casting odd shadows under the soft blue light. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms. Others appeared to be made of living crystal that sparkled when they moved. A few seemed to be machines that walked and talked like people. In the center of the hall stood a tall figure with pale blue skin. His name was Veltar, and he was the speaker for the Zephyrian Empire. His people were known across the galaxy for being smart and powerful. Today, he had something important to discuss. "Fellow council members," Veltar began, his voice carrying easily through the massive room. "We are here to talk about the newest species to join us in space travel. The humans." A wave of clicking, buzzing, and electronic sounds filled the hall. This was how different alien species laughed. The sound was not kind. Veltar raised one of his 4 arms for silence. "These humans have built ships that move faster than light, but look at how they did it." A large screen appeared in the air, above him showing pictures of human spaceships. The ships looked rough and simple compared to the smooth, elegant vessels the aliens built. They were covered in thick metal plates and had large engines that glowed orange with fire. Gun barrels stuck out from every side like the spines of an angry animal. "They use controlled explosions to move," Veltar said with disgust. "Explosions! Like primitive creatures making fire with sticks and stones." Queen Zaxth of the Insect Collective stood up on her 6 legs. Her voice sounded like grinding metal when she spoke. "My scouts have watched them for months. They still shoot metal bullets at each other. They burn chemicals just to leave their own planet. How can such simple minds understand the complex ways of galactic civilization?" More laughter filled the hall. But in one small section, 3 humans sat quietly and listened. They wore simple blue uniforms that looked plain next to the flowing robes and biosuits of the aliens around them. Captain Jake Morrison was the leader of the human group. He had short brown hair and calm gray eyes that missed nothing. Next to him sat Dr. Lisa Chen, a scientist who studied alien technology. On his other side was Ambassador Helen Rodriguez, whose job was to speak for all humans in this strange place. Jake watched the aliens mock his people and felt his jaw tighten, but he stayed quiet. Helen had told him to let her do the talking today. "Look at their weapons," said a voice from the machine section. The speaker was Unit 347, a robot with glowing red sensors for eyes. "They fire simple projectiles. We bend reality itself to destroy our enemies. They are like children playing with toys." Veltar nodded. "Exactly. And their behavior is even worse than their technology. Our studies show they make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. They fight wars over ideas and feelings. They risk everything for individuals instead of thinking about the greater good." "Dangerous," buzzed Queen Zaxth. "A species that cannot control its emotions cannot be trusted with advanced technology. What if they decide to attack us simply because they feel angry?" Helen Rodriguez stood up slowly. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the anger underneath. "May I respond to these charges?" The hall fell silent. Veltar looked annoyed that a human dared to interrupt. "Very well. Speak." "You call us primitive because we use explosions and metal bullets," Helen said. "But those simple tools helped us survive on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to adapt, to fix things when they broke, to keep fighting when everything went wrong. Primitive solutions for primitive problems," Veltar replied, coldly. Helen continued as if he had not spoken. "You say we are too emotional. But our emotions drive us to protect each other, to explore dangerous places, to never give up when the smart thing would be to quit. How many of your species would fly into an unknown solar system just to see what was there?" "A foolish waste of resources," said Unit 347. "Maybe," Helen agreed. "But that foolish waste of resources brought us to your attention. We went from discovering fire to traveling between stars in just a few thousand years. How long did it take your people?" The hall erupted in angry sounds. Several aliens stood up and started shouting in their strange languages. Veltar raised all 4 arms and waited for quiet. "The question before us is simple," he announced. "Are humans ready to join galactic civilization? Based on what we have seen and heard today, I believe the answer is clear. Jake felt his heart sink. He had hoped for a different outcome. Veltar looked directly at the human section. Humanity shows promise, but they are still too young, too violent, too unpredictable. We cannot risk allowing such a species free access to our worlds and technology. What are you saying? Helen asked, though Jake could tell she already knew. The Galactic Council votes to restrict humanity to their home solar system for the next 100 years. During this time, you may continue to develop your civilization. We will check on your progress and perhaps reconsider in the future. The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species agreed that humans were too dangerous and primitive to be trusted. As the council members began to leave, Veltar approached the human group. "Do not take this personally," he said in a tone that sounded almost sorry. "Many species need time to mature. Your people show great energy and creativity. Channel those traits in the right direction, and perhaps next century will be different." Jake Morrison looked up at the tall alien. And what if something happens before then? What if the galaxy needs help, and our primitive methods are the only thing that works? Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Captain Morrison, our civilizations have survived for millions of years using advanced science and careful planning. I assure you, there is nothing in this galaxy that would require your particular brand of chaos." The alien walked away, leaving the three humans alone in the vast, empty hall. Helen put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "We tried." Jake stared at the empty seats where hundreds of aliens had just dismissed his entire species. "Yeah, we did. But something tells me they're going to regret this decision sooner than they think." Lisa Chen looked up from her notes. "What makes you say that?" Jake smiled grimly. "Because in all their talk about logic and advanced planning, they made one big mistake. They assume the universe is going to keep playing by their rules." As they walked toward the exit, none of them could know that in just 6 months, something would come from the dark space between galaxies that would change everything. Something that would make the Council very glad that humans never learned to give up. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council's decision to keep humanity locked in their home system. Life went on as normal for most of the galaxy's citizens. Trade ships moved between worlds, scientists studied new discoveries, and diplomats made their usual deals and arguments. But in the deep space monitoring station orbiting the galaxy's edge, something unusual appeared on the sensors. Dr. Kethmos was a Zephyrian scientist who had spent his whole life studying the empty space between galaxies. Most beings found his work boring, but he loved the peaceful quiet of the void. Nothing ever happened out there, which was exactly why he chose to study it. That morning started like any other. Kethmos drank his morning nutrient solution and checked the overnight sensor readings, but something was wrong. There was a new signal in the data, something that should not exist. "Computer, run a full diagnostic on Sensor Array 7, he commanded. "All systems functioning normally," the computer replied in its calm, artificial voice. But the reading was still there. Something massive was moving through the void between galaxies, traveling toward them at impossible speed. Kethmos ran the calculations 3 times. The object was bigger than most moons and moving faster than anything he had ever seen. "Computer, send immediate priority message to Galactic Command. Unknown object approaching from extragalactic space. Size estimate, 12,000 kilometers diameter. Speed, beyond current measurement capability." Within hours, every major species in the galaxy knew about the approaching object. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand what they were seeing. The thing seemed to bend space and time around itself. Regular physics did not apply to it. Admiral Vexon of the Zephyrian Deep Space Fleet received orders to investigate. His ship, the Infinite Glory, was the most advanced vessel in the galaxy. It could manipulate energy on a quantum level and had shields that could stop anything known to science. "All crew to battle stations," Vexon announced as they approached the object's last known position. "Prepare for first contact protocols." But when they arrived, they found something that made no sense. 3 entire star systems had gone dark, not destroyed, just empty, as if someone had erased them from existence. "Sir," reported his science officer, "I'm detecting no debris, no radiation, no trace that those systems ever existed. It's like they were simply Removed. Before Vexon could respond, something appeared on their screens. The object was enormous, looking like a jellyfish made of living darkness. Tentacles that stretched for thousands of kilometers reached out in all directions. Where they touched space itself, reality seemed to ripple and tear. "Open communication channels," Vexon ordered. "All frequencies." They tried every known method of contact. Light signals, radio waves, quantum entanglement, even telepathic projection. Nothing worked. The thing simply ignored them. "Sir, it's moving toward us," the tactical officer reported, fear creeping into his voice. "All weapons, full power. Target the center mass." The Infinite Glory's energy cannons fired beams of pure force that could cut through planets. The beams struck the entity and simply disappeared as if they had never existed. "Quantum torpedoes, maximum yield!" The torpedoes exploded against the creature's surface with enough force to destroy a small moon. The entity did not even slow down. One of its massive tentacles reached toward their ship. When it touched the Infinite Glory's shields, the most advanced defensive system in the galaxy simply stopped working. Not overloaded or destroyed. It just ceased to exist. "Emergency warp! Get us out of here!" Vexon shouted. But it was too late. The tentacle wrapped around their ship, and the last thing the crew saw was darkness closing in from all sides. Back at Galactic Command, the loss of the Infinite Glory sent shockwaves through every government. If the Zephyrian's most powerful ship could not even damage this thing, what hope did anyone else have? The crystalline Altarians tried next. Their ships could phase in and out of reality, existing in multiple dimensions at once. Surely nothing could touch them. They were wrong, though. Machine Collective sent their most advanced artificial intelligences, beings that could process information faster than any biological mind. They vanished just as quickly as the others. One by one, every species sent their best and strongest to fight the entity. And one by one, they all disappeared into the darkness. The thing continued moving through space, consuming everything in its path. Entire worlds went silent as it passed. In the Galactic Council chambers, panic filled the air. Representatives who had been proud and confident 6 months ago now looked terrified and desperate. 17 systems gone, reported Unit 851, one of the few remaining machine intelligences. Estimated time until it reaches the core worlds, 48 hours. Queen Zaketh clicked her mandibles nervously. All of our most advanced weapons have failed. Our best scientists cannot even understand what this thing is. What options do we have left? The hall fell silent. For the first time in their history, the combined wisdom and technology of the galaxy's greatest civilizations was not enough. Veltar stood slowly. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something none of them had ever seen in his eyes: desperation. "There is one possibility," he said quietly. "What?" demanded Queen Zaketh. "We have tried everything." Veltar looked uncomfortable. "Not everything. There is one species we have not asked for help." The realization hit the hall like a wave. Several representatives started talking at once, their voices mixing into a chaos of different languages. "You cannot be serious," buzzed one of the insect delegates. "They are barely out of their stone age," protested a crystalline being. "Their technology is primitive junk," added Unit 851. Veltar raised his arms for silence. "I know what we said about the humans. I know what we decided. But conventional thinking has failed us. Perhaps what we need now is unconventional thinking." "You want to ask the humans for help?" Queen Zaketh could not hide the disbelief in her voice. "I want to survive," Veltar replied simply. "And right, now they are the only option we have left." The debate that followed was fierce. Many council members would rather face extinction than admit they needed help from a species they had called primitive. But as reports came in of more worlds going dark, fear won over pride. The vote was close, but it passed. Veltar activated the quantum communication array and sent a signal toward a small yellow star on the galaxy's outer rim. He had to wait several minutes for the signal to cross the vast distance to Earth. When Admiral Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen, Veltar almost lost his nerve. The human looked older, more tired than he had 6 months ago, but his eyes were still sharp and alert. "Ambassador Veltar," Jake said politely, This is unexpected. I thought we weren't supposed to leave our solar system for another 99.5 years. Veltar swallowed his pride. Admiral Morrison, we need your help. Our help. Jake raised an eyebrow. What kind of help could a primitive species like humanity possibly offer to the advanced Galactic Council? The words stung, because they were Veltar's own, thrown back at him. But he pressed on. There is something coming from outside our galaxy. It has destroyed 17 star systems and defeated our most powerful weapons. We have lost our best ships, and crews trying to stop it. Jake's expression grew serious. What exactly are you asking us to do? Bring your ships, bring your weapons, bring your... Veltar paused, struggling with the words. Bring your unconventional methods. Whatever this thing is, it seems to be immune to our advanced technology. And you think our primitive explosions and metal bullets might work where your quantum weapons failed? I think, Veltar said slowly, that we are about to find out if there really is nothing in this galaxy that would require your particular brand of chaos. Jake was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Veltar could see other humans moving around, preparing for something. We'll be there in 6 hours, Jake finally said. 6 hours? But that's impossible. Even with your fastest ships, it would take weeks to reach our position. Jake smiled, and for the first time, Veltar saw something in that smile that made him think maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had underestimated humanity in more ways than one. Ambassador, you're about to learn that humans don't really believe in the word impossible. Admiral Jake Morrison kept his word. 6 hours later, 3 human ships dropped out of warp space near the crisis zone. The alien fleet commanders who saw them arrive could barely believe what they were looking at. The human ships were nothing, like the sleek, beautiful vessels the other species built. The UES Defiant, UES Ranger, and UES Guardian looked like flying metal boxes covered in armor plating. Gun barrels stuck out from every surface. Missile pods hung from the hulls like metal fruit. External fuel tanks and equipment gave them a rough, unfinished appearance. Those things actually flew here? Queen Zath asked over the communication channel. They look like they were built in someone's backyard. Commander Amy Parker, the chief engineer of the Defiant, heard the comment through the open channel. She was a tough woman from Texas with grease under her fingernails and a no-nonsense attitude. Ma'am, these ships were built in someone's backyard, she replied cheerfully. Mine, and they'll outrun, outfight, and outlast anything you've got. Veltar tried to keep the peace. Admiral Morrison, thank you for coming. We have prepared detailed tactical analysis and strategic recommendations for engaging the entity. That's nice, Jake replied. But first, I want to see this thing for myself. All ships, advance to visual range. The combined fleet moved forward, through space, until the entity came into view. Even the humans, who had seen the sensor readings, were impressed by its size. The creature was massive, stretching across thousands of kilometers of space. Its body looked like a jellyfish made of living shadow, with tentacles that seemed to bend light around them. Well, said Commander Rick Davis from the bridge of the Ranger, that's definitely the biggest space monster I've ever seen. Dr. Lisa Chen studied the readings from her position at the science station. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It seems to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The alien commanders began discussing complex battle plans. Admiral Zethkar of the Crystalline Fleet suggested using temporal displacement weapons. Unit 892 proposed quantum phase bombardment. Queen Zakath wanted to try dimensional barrier projections. Jake listened to their ideas with growing amusement. Each plan was more complicated than the last, involving technology the humans had never heard of and scientific theories they could barely pronounce. If I may interrupt, Jake finally said. Amy, what's your professional assessment of our target? Commander Parker looked at her instruments and grinned. Well, Admiral, it looks to me like a big space jellyfish. Tough on the outside, probably. Squishy on the inside. Your recommendation? Shoot it until it stops moving, sir. The alien commanders fell silent. Admiral Zethkar was the first to speak, his crystalline voice ringing with disbelief. Admiral Morrison, surely you cannot be serious. This entity has defeated our most sophisticated weapons systems. Our quantum disruptors had no effect. Our reality-bending cannons simply disappeared when they touched it. And you propose to attack it with kinetic projectiles? And explosives. Amy added helpfully. Don't forget the explosives. Unit 892's mechanical voice crackled over the communication system. This is illogical. Primitive ballistic weapons cannot succeed where advanced energy manipulation has failed. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. Commander Davis was checking weapons systems. Tactical Officer Ben Torres was programming missile guidance computers. Dr. Chen was analyzing the creature's weak points, using methods that would have made alien scientists laugh. You know what your problem is? Jake asked the alien fleet. You're all so smart that you've forgotten how to think simple. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most complicated one. But the physics, began Admiral Zethkar. The physics are fine, Jake interrupted. You're just thinking about them wrong. This thing eats energy, right? Every time you shoot lasers or quantum beams at it, it just absorbs them and gets stronger. So stop feeding it. What do you suggest instead? Veltar asked, though his tone suggested he was afraid of the answer. Jake turned to his crew. Ben, prep all missile batteries for nuclear saturation bombardment. Rick, I want you to take the Ranger and Guardian around to flank positions. Amy, he paused and looked at his chief engineer with a grin. Hold my beer. Amy Parker literally took Jake's coffee mug from his hands, which made several alien commanders wonder if humans had lost their minds entirely. Sir, what exactly are we doing? Commander Davis asked from the Ranger. Something stupid, Jake replied cheerfully. Amy, remember that experimental warp core modification you've been wanting to test? The one that could blow us all to pieces if it doesn't work? That's the one. Amy's grin got bigger. Oh, this is going to be fun. The alien commanders watched in growing horror as the human ships began preparations for what looked like the most reckless attack plan in galactic history. Admiral Morrison, Veltar called urgently. Perhaps we should coordinate our efforts. My tactical staff has prepared a detailed assault matrix that takes into account the entity's multidimensional properties. No offense, Ambassador, Jake cut him off, but your tactical staff is the reason you're losing. Ben, are those nukes ready? Locked and loaded, sir. Might I suggest we aim for something important? Like what? How about that big glowy bit in the center? Dr. Chen looked up from her instruments. That's probably its central nervous system, or brain, or both. Works for me, Jake said. Amy, how long do you need for your little science project? Give me 5 minutes to recalibrate the warp core and we'll find out if physics textbooks are more like guidelines than actual rules. Admiral, Zethkar made a sound that might have been a crystalline being having a panic attack. You cannot seriously intend to modify your warp drive while in combat. The energy feedback alone could... Could what? Amy asked as she worked. Kill us? The way I see it, we're probably going to die anyway. Might as well die doing something. Interesting. The entity, which had been drifting through space, consuming everything in its path, suddenly changed direction. Its massive form began moving toward the fleet, tentacles reaching out like the arms of some cosmic octopus. Contacts coming in fast, reported Ben Torres. Looks like our new friend wants to play. All ships, scatter formation, Jake ordered. Remember, we're not trying to win pretty. We're trying to win ugly, messy, and with as much noise as possible. The human ships broke apart and began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense to the alien commanders. Instead of maintaining formation, they spread out randomly. Instead of coordinating their fire, each ship began attacking different targets. This is madness, Admiral Zethkar broadcast. You have no formation discipline, no fire coordination, no strategic cohesion. Exactly, Jake replied, as the Defiant opened fire with every weapon it had. Hard to plan for chaos when you spend your whole life thinking in straight lines. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the entity, while railgun rounds punched holes through its outer membrane. The creature's tentacles lashed out, trying to grab the human ships, but they were moving too unpredictably to catch. Amy, how's that warp core coming along? Jake asked as the ship shook from a near miss. Almost ready, sir. This is either going to be brilliant, or we're all going to end up as space dust. Those are the same thing as far as I'm concerned. As the battle raged around them, Jake Morrison looked at his crew and felt a familiar surge of pride. They weren't the smartest beings in the galaxy. They didn't have the most advanced technology, but they had something the others had lost somewhere in all their sophistication. They had the willingness to try something completely insane just to see if it would work. Amy? Ready when you are, Admiral. Jake smiled and keyed the communication channel so every ship in the fleet could hear him. All right, everyone. Time to show this thing what happens when you mess with a species too stupid to know when they're beaten. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for centuries to come, though most professors would warn their students never to try it themselves. Admiral Jake Morrison's plan was not really a plan at all. It was controlled. Chaos on a scale that made experienced commanders want to hide under their desks. But somehow, impossibly, it began to work. The UES Defiant fired its nuclear missiles, but not at the entity itself. Instead, the warhead struck a nearby asteroid field, turning solid rock into millions of high-speed fragments. The debris cloud spread out like a metal storm, filling the space around the creature and disrupting whatever senses it used to navigate. That actually worked, Dr. Lisa Chen said with surprise. The debris is interfering with its quantum field detection. Good, Jake replied as the ship shook from another impact. Ben, target those tentacles with the railguns. I want to see if this thing bleeds. The Defiant's magnetic rail cannons fired tungsten rods at incredible speed. The projectiles punched through the entity's outer membrane like bullets through paper. Where they hit, dark fluid began leaking into space. It does bleed! Ben Torres shouted with excitement. And it doesn't like it! The creature's movements became more aggressive. Its tentacles lashed out wildly, trying to grab the human ships. But Commander Rick Davis had taken the Ranger and Guardian to flanking positions, and now they were attacking from multiple directions at once. Rick, how are you doing over there? Jake called. Having a party, Admiral. This thing's got too many arms to watch them all. We're shooting holes in it faster than it can heal them. But the most insane part of the battle was still to come. As the other human ships kept the entity distracted, Commander Amy Parker put her experimental warp core modification into effect. All right, boys and girls, she announced over the ship's intercom. We're about to turn our entire ship into a giant electromagnetic weapon. This might hurt a bit. Define a bit, Jake requested. Well, if my calculations are right, we'll generate an electromagnetic pulse so strong it'll scramble every piece of electronics within 1,000 kilometers, including ours. And if your calculations are wrong, then we'll find out what it's like to exist in 17 different dimensions at the same time. Jake considered this for about 2 seconds. Do it. The Defiant's warp core began cycling through frequencies that should not have been possible. Energy patterns that violated. At least 6 laws of physics started building up in the ship's power systems. Every instrument on the bridge went crazy, displaying readings that made no sense. But Amy Parker was not done yet. As the warp core reached critical resonance, she activated what she called her special surprise. Boarding pods away, she announced. Boarding pods! Veltar's horrified voice came over the communication channel. You're sending people inside that thing? Marines, Jake corrected. There's a difference. The pods shot out from the Defiant's launch tubes like bullets, carrying 12 of Earth's finest space marines directly into the entity's massive body. Leading them was Sergeant Lisa Murphy, a tough woman from Chicago who had volunteered for the mission with a grin and the words, I've always wanted to fight something really big. Inside the entity, the Marines found themselves in a world unlike anything in their training manuals. The creature's interior was like a living cave system, with walls that pulsed and breathed. Bioluminescent fluid flowed through channels that looked like blood vessels the size of subway tunnels. Well, this is new, Sergeant Murphy said as she checked her plasma rifle. Okay, people, remember the mission. Find the brain and blow it up. How do we know what the brain looks like? Asked Corporal Danny Stone. Probably the biggest, ugliest thing we can find. When in doubt, shoot it. The Marines began moving through the creature's body, following corridors that seemed to lead toward the center. Along the way, they encountered the entity's immune system. Living antibodies the size of tanks that tried to destroy the invaders. Contact! Murphy shouted as the first antibody rounded a corner. The thing looked like a cross between a white blood cell and a nightmare, covered in spines and moving with disturbing speed. The Marines opened fire with weapons designed for fighting in space. Plasma bolts lit up the organic corridors as they battled their way deeper into the creature. Each antibody they destroyed seemed to make the entity more angry, and its external attacks on the human fleet became more desperate. Meanwhile, Amy Parker's electromagnetic experiment was reaching its climax. The Defiant's modified warp core was generating energy patterns that made nearby space ripple like water. Amy, whatever you're doing, do it faster, Jake called as tentacles wrapped around the ship's hull. This thing's trying to crush us. Almost there, sir. Just need to find the right frequency. If this works, it should scramble the entity's nervous system like a bug zapper hitting a mosquito. The alien commanders watched all of this with a mixture of horror and fascination. Admiral Zethkar had stopped giving advice and was simply staring at his tactical displays in disbelief. They have soldiers fighting inside the creature, he reported to his own crew. Their ship is about to explode from some kind of power overload, and their other vessels are shooting at it with kinetic weapons that should not be able to penetrate its defenses. Are they winning? Asked his science officer. I honestly cannot tell. Nothing they are doing should work according to known physics. Inside the entity, Sergeant Murphy and her team had reached what looked like the creature's central nervous system. The chamber they found was enormous, filled with pulsing neural tissue that glowed with its own light. That's definitely a brain, said Corporal Stone. Big enough target for you, Sergeant? Asked Private Tony Martinez as he unpacked the demolition charges they had brought. Plenty big, Murphy replied. Set the charges for maximum yield. If we're going to give this thing a headache, let's make it a memorable one. As the Marines worked to place their explosives, the entity seemed to realize what was happening. The antibodies came at them in waves, forcing the humans to fight a running battle through the creature's own nervous system. Charges set, Martinez called out. 30 seconds to detonation. Everyone out, Murphy ordered. Move, move, move. At that exact moment, Amy Parker's electromagnetic weapon reached full power. The Defiance warp core released a pulse of energy that lit up space like a miniature star. The effect on the entity was immediate and dramatic. Its tentacles stopped moving in coordinated attacks and began thrashing randomly. The creature's movements became erratic, as if it could no longer control its own body properly. It's working, Dr. Chen shouted from her science station. The electromagnetic pulse is disrupting its neural activity. And here comes the big finish, Amy added as she watched her countdown timer reach 0. The explosions from inside the creature were visible as flashes of light through its translucent body. Sergeant Murphy and her team had done their job perfectly, and the entity's central nervous system was torn apart by carefully placed demolition charges. The result was spectacular. The massive creature, which had seemed unstoppable just moments before, began to convulse. Its tentacles fell away from the human ships as it lost control of its motor functions. But Admiral Morrison was not finished yet. Ben, do we still have those experimental antimatter charges? Yes, sir, but they're completely untested. The yield calculations could be way off. Perfect. Load them up and target the center mass. If this thing wants to fight dirty, we'll show it what dirty really looks like. The antimatter torpedoes streaked through space toward the dying entity. When they hit, the explosion was visible. From 3 star systems away, the creature that had consumed 17 worlds and defeated the galaxy's most advanced weapons was reduced to scattered particles floating in space. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damage, reports came in. The alien fleet commanders sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. Status report, Jake requested over the communication channel. All human ships operational, reported Commander Davis from the Ranger. Minor damage, but nothing we can't fix. Marine. Team recovered successfully, added Commander Parker. Sergeant Murphy says it was the most fun she's had since boot camp. Veltar's voice came over the channel, shaky but filled with something that might have been respect. Admiral Morrison, how did you know that would work? Jake thought about it for a moment. We didn't. But sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to ignore the fact that it's impossible and just start shooting things. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 3 weeks after the battle, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different than they had 6 months earlier. The same aliens sat in their curved rows, but their attitudes had changed completely. Where once there had been arrogance and dismissal, now there was respect and something that looked very much like fear. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the center of the hall, wearing the same simple blue uniform he had worn before. But this time, when he spoke, every being in the room listened carefully to every word. The entity has been completely destroyed, Jake reported. Our science teams have analyzed the debris field and confirmed no remaining threat. The consumed star systems cannot be restored, but the expansion has been stopped. Veltar rose from his seat. The tall Zephyrian ambassador looked older than he had just a few weeks ago. The stress of nearly losing everything had marked him. "Admiral Morrison," he began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "The Galactic Council owes humanity a debt that can never be fully repaid. Your methods were unconventional, but effective in ways our most advanced thinking could not predict. We prefer to call it aggressive problem-solving," Jake replied with a slight smile. Queen Zakth clicked her mandibles nervously. "Your tactics defied every principle of modern space warfare. You attacked randomly with no coordination using weapons we considered obsolete. By all logic, you should have failed." "Logic's a funny thing," Commander Amy Parker said from her position behind Jake. "Sometimes it gets in the way of actually getting things done," the Insect Queen continued. "Our military academies are already rewriting their textbooks. What you accomplished should not have been possible." Unit 892 added its electronic voice to the discussion. "Human unpredictability appears to be a significant tactical advantage. Our combat algorithms cannot model behavior that ignores statistical probability." Dr. Lisa Chen stepped forward. "With respect, you're all missing the point. This wasn't about tactics or weapons or even luck. It was about attitude." "Explain," requested Admiral Zethkar of the Crystalline Fleet. "Every one of your species tried to fight that thing using the same approach you use for everything else," Lisa continued. "Careful analysis, detailed planning, advanced technology applied in precise ways. But the entity had adapted to that kind of thinking. It expected sophisticated attacks. And we gave it the opposite," Jake added. "We hit it with chaos, improvisation, and weapons so simple they didn't register as a real threat until it was too late." Veltar looked uncomfortable. "Admiral, the Council has discussed your success at length. We have reached a decision regarding humanity's status in galactic civilization." Jake waited. He had expected this conversation. "The restrictions placed on your species 6 months ago are hereby lifted completely. Furthermore, the Council wishes to offer humanity full membership with all associated privileges and access to our most advanced technologies." The offer was generous, far more than Jake had hoped for when this all started. But something in Veltar's tone suggested there was more to come. "Additionally," the Zephyrian continued, "we would like to propose a new arrangement. Several Council members have suggested that humanity might serve as consultants for future crisis situations." "What kind of consultants?" Amy asked suspiciously. Queen Zakth answered, "The kind that get called when normal methods fail and the galaxy needs someone willing to try impossible solutions." "You want us to be your emergency backup plan," Jake said. "It was not really a question." "More than that," Unit 892 replied. "Analysis of recent events suggests that galactic civilization has become too rigid in its thinking. We solve problems the same ways our ancestors did millions of years ago. Perhaps it is time to learn new approaches." Admiral Zethkar added, "My people have studied your battle recordings extensively. Your use of kinetic weapons, electromagnetic, disruption, and direct assault techniques has opened entirely new fields of tactical research. Plus," said a new voice from the back of the chamber, "you fight really, really well." Everyone turned to see Sergeant Lisa Murphy walking down the aisle in her dress uniform. The Marine had been awarded the Galactic Medal of Valor, making her the first human to receive the honor. "Sergeant Murphy," Jake said with surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Well, Admiral, seems like half the military forces in the galaxy want to learn how humans fight. They've offered me a teaching position at the Galactic War College." "And?" "I told them I'd think about it, but only if they promise not to make me wear one of those fancy alien uniforms. This one works just fine." The alien commanders looked at each other uncertainly. They were used to beings who wanted to adopt their advanced ways, not humans who seemed perfectly happy with their primitive equipment and simple methods. Veltar cleared his throat. "Admiral Morrison, what is your response to the Council's offer?" Jake looked around the vast hall at hundreds of alien faces watching him expectantly. 6 months ago, these same beings had dismissed his people as too primitive for civilized society. Now they wanted humans to help solve their most difficult problems. "I accept the Council's offer of full membership," he said finally, "but I have some conditions." "Name them," Veltar replied immediately. First, we do things our way. You don't get to complain when our methods look crazy or dangerous. If you want human solutions, you get human approaches. Agreed. Second, we're not changing to fit your idea of advanced civilization. Our ships will still look ugly, our weapons will still be simple, and we'll still make decisions based on what feels right instead of what the computer says. Acceptable. And third, Jake paused and looked directly at Veltar. The next time someone tells you that there's nothing in this galaxy that requires our particular brand of chaos, you remember what happened 3 weeks ago. Veltar nodded, solemnly. We will not forget. Commander Parker stepped up beside Jake. So what happens now, Admiral? Now we go home and get ready for the next impossible problem, Jake replied. Because something tells me this galaxy is going to keep finding new ways to surprise us. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Veltar approached them one last time. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Go ahead. When you realized the entity was immune to our most advanced weapons, when you saw that conventional tactics had failed completely, were you not afraid? Jake thought about the question seriously. Of course I was afraid. We all were. But fear's not a reason to stop trying. Then what is? Jake smiled and clapped the alien ambassador on one of his 4 shoulders. Running out of beer. As they walked toward the exit, Amy Parker nudged Jake with her elbow. Admiral? Yes? Next time someone asks us to save the galaxy, remind me to bring more explosives. Why's that? Because I've got a feeling that was just the warm-up round. Behind them, the Galactic Council settled into their seats and began discussing their next agenda item. But for the first time in millions of years, they had a backup plan that did not involve careful analysis or advanced technology. They had humans, and as Veltar had learned, sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem was to hand it to someone too stubborn to accept that it was impossible in the first place. In the months that followed, humanity took their place not as junior members of galactic civilization, but as the species everyone called when the universe stopped making sense and conventional wisdom failed completely. They were the ones who showed up when someone said, "This can't be done," and replied, "Hold my beer and watch this," and the galaxy was never quite the same again. 6 months later, when the first reports came in of mysterious signals from another galaxy entirely, the Galactic Council did not waste time debating sophisticated response strategies or forming research committees. They sent a message to Earth with just 4 words, "We need you again." Admiral Jake Morrison's response was equally brief. On our way. Because some problems require advanced thinking, careful planning, and sophisticated technology, but others just need someone crazy enough to try shooting them until they stop moving. The galaxy had learned to appreciate the difference.